Hi everyone, it's Elise from Kit and Clatter online colouring classes and welcome to our free hour colouring class for markers and pencils. This class was created as a special thank you to all of our community and class members during 2023. It's important to remember that a lot of the information in this class may be new and that can feel overwhelming at times. Try to take any pressure or expectation off with learning today. It really doesn't matter what your finished project looks like, and as long as you've learned one new thing or improved upon one skill you already have, then you've grown. So let's get ready to jump in here today. Before we start, I'm going to give you a little crash course on an art fundamental called lightsource. This is really important whenever we do any sort of colouring, as it informs where your shading will be placed on the page. So I usually work with ambient lighting, which is a major source of light in a scene like the sun, and these cast big cones of light over your entire image rather than coming from one side. The way that we approach adding shading with ambient light is we have to look at the image and determine what parts are popping out toward us. These raised parts will be hit by any light rays first and will make them appear lighter and brighter, and we call these highlights. The opposite of this is parts of the object that are curving or slanting away from the light. As these are further back, they're darker and are called shadows. Now between highlight and shadow, we have the midtone, and this is considered the true color of the object. We also have to consider cast shadows. A cast shadow is when an object in front or above casts a shadow on the object below or behind. It helps to show the distance between the objects and levels, and this is going to create the most added dimension in your projects. If you're new to my colouring classes, this video today is going to be a very similar format to how our monthly classes are run, but I'm going to be breaking down this image in both markers and pencils separately for you, so you can follow along no matter what medium you're using. At the start of the video here, I'm going to be breaking down some of the art foundations and fundamentals that we'll be using to colour the image. So this part of the video is theory-based, and it's even more important, I think, than the actual colouring portion of the video, because we're going to go through not just how to do the colouring, but the why behind it. And this is really important for you to really enhance and grow your colouring skills and to take away to apply to other images after class. So to create really dimensional colouring, we're following a lot of different art theories, and especially like what I went through at the start of the video where we went through those light source foundations. So whenever we come to colour anything, we want to keep that light source component in mind. And you can even put that part of the video on to remind you of those steps at any point. But it is the most important thing to take away, because every time we lay down colour, we're thinking about that light source and we're using those foundations to create this three-dimensionality. The way that we would break it down is we look at our image first and we want to think about what sort of shapes make up this image. So to make it the most simple way, I can think of the head as being like a sphere. It's not flat. We know if we're in 3D, we're looking at it rounded from all sides. So if we think about it as being rounded, we know that the sides here are curving away from us, so we're going to get darker. And this is why we have our darker colors around those outside edges, with the middle here getting a lot lighter. It does get a little darker in and around our eyes, so we think of this section like rounding up toward us and then rounding back down toward that eye area. And that middle part there is where the highest point is. So that's where our light comes down and hits, and why it appears lighter around the two eye areas. You'll also notice that we have the little furry feathers darker around the beak as well, because they too would sort of go in at that area. And all of our little feathers are emanating from the beak point. So even from above, you can see everything is extending around in this circular motion. This is the same for all animals, fur and feathers as well. It will generally emanate from the nose or the beak area. So that's a good tip that you can take away to start applying to any of your animal images. You'll notice that we have a darker lot of feathers at the very top here, and they too are following that same circular motion, coming into a point just above the beak. This area too is going to get a little lighter through the center, creating that pop out. So we're creating all around the edges this darker shadow to show that the head as a whole is curving around. Now the head and the body are two separate entities, and when we have something above something else, we create that cast shadow. So we want to think of the head as sticking out over the body, and we can see that by how the head comes around and cuts straight over that wing and the body shape. So you'll notice straight underneath the head, we do get a lot darker, and that's our cast shadow separating this top element with this lower element. We also have the wings, which is sitting over the body, and so we have a nice dark shadow coming around these as well, so we can create that distinction. But not only that, with the feathers themselves and the wings and the body, we have these overlapping elements. So when one thing overlaps another, we come down like this, we've got something above on something behind. So we will get that cast shadow straight underneath the top layer. And if you have a look at this, you can see we've got that darker line that comes straight underneath the top layer in each section here. So always the darker shadow is on the section that's behind or below. So that's why the darker line almost appears like it's at the top of each of these sections, but it's at the top because that part there is straight under the section above. You'll notice as well, it's the same in the breast or chest area here, but these feathers are a lot lighter and softer. Even though they're lighter, we still have this darker color though to show the difference in these layers so we can actually create dimension. So essentially we're coming around each feather that's above and we add our shading this way. So don't think of shading on that individual feather, think of shading below it, and that's how we create the dimension. When we come into our eye area here, eyes can hold so much personality. You'll notice that my iris is darker toward the top and gets brighter toward the bottom. We have several highlights here, and you can always place as many or few as you like. It will really change up how that character personality looks. I wanted something a bit more magical, so I added these few little specks and sparkles in the eye as well. The way that you place your highlights will also determine the direction the eye is looking. Generally, to bring the gaze down a little bit, you can add shading into the sides, black shading into the sides, but I've kept this relatively open to make the eyes look bigger. So if you were coloring a person, for example, the black will generally come down a lot lower. You'll notice that the brightest of the highlight is in the top corner of the eye, and this helps to direction that gaze upward. Having a little highlight at the bottom left corner here helps to further create some glow, but it still keeps all the focus coming on this angle. The beak and the toes have a nice highlight straight through the center, so we can show that this is the high point and the sides get darker as they round. So these are all the basic theories that we're going to be using for our coloring today. And as we went through at the start of the video, we've got that light source, so we're showing highlight, midtone, and shadow, and each of our color choices is helping to show that. A darker color in the shadow areas, a middle color as we get further out, and our lightest color through the highlight areas. So that's the same for markers and pencils. You may have more than 3 colors to make the transition smoother or to create a more complex blend, but essentially that's what we're aiming to show here today. And that's how we're going to create all of this dimension. In my classes, I go through this in a huge amount of detail for you, so you can start to learn how to apply this to all different images, topics, and techniques after class. The monthly class is the most popular class that I do because this actually is forcing you to try things out of your comfort zone to really enhance your understanding of these art foundations. We can get a little bit complacent with our coloring and tend to pick topics which we love the best, but it can really hinder our growth. For example, let's say you love coloring florals, and so you only ever choose to follow along with floral coloring tutorials. The problem with this is we end up getting a very small grasp on light source, color theory, textures. We're not expanding our vocabulary of coloring. It's the times when we try things out of our comfort zone, pushing ourselves to maybe try blends or techniques or shapes that we don't usually try, that we learn the most. And the people whose coloring you admire the most color everything. And they do a beautiful job because they have a greater understanding of how to apply these techniques to any image that comes their way. So that's what the monthly class is aiming to do. It's aiming to get you trying such a big array of techniques, topics, and images that you're not stuck sitting in that comfort zone. This is great, especially if you're a beginner or even if you are a more advanced colorist. The more you start pushing yourself outside of what's familiar, the more you're going to grow, whether you're brand new to coloring or whether you've been coloring for years. And we're all here today to learn something new, so let's start pushing ourselves. Remember, your first practice is never going to be great. So if you're trying something new today, even if you've been coloring for a while, you're learning these art foundations, maybe you don't always color animals, or maybe you're just starting out on your coloring journey. It's okay for your practice just to be a learning experience. I want you to make mistakes today. I want you to get used to feeling a little bit uncomfortable because that means that you're starting to grow. You're starting to push yourself to try something new, to increase the skill set that you have. We don't want to just continue doing the same things over and over because we're not going to grow where we're comfortable. So come with me today. Let's make some mistakes. Let's learn some new things and let's be proud of our efforts. Every single coloring piece means that you are growing and you're doing an amazing job. And I'm right here to help if you get stuck any step of the way. Alright, so I'm going to color with pencils first. If you're using markers, you can fast forward to the markers portion of the video tutorial. If you have both mediums, consider doing this tutorial twice. I do color in real time as I'm annotating as well, so you'll get slightly different tips in each part of the tutorial depending on what medium you're using. Welcome to the pencils portion of the video tutorial. Now you should have watched the start of this video where I've gone through some of the art foundations that we'll be using to color our little owl here today. I know that listening to a little bit of theory and chatting can feel a little bit boring at times, but it's really important to give you a greater understanding of not only how we're going to color, but the why behind this as well. So please do go back and take a watch if you haven't already. Now before we get started, I'm going to run you through some pencil blending basic tips just to help you feel comfortable before we come to our final image. So when we color with our pencils, the first thing that I'm going to talk about is paper. So it's really important that we have a good drawing paper when we're coloring with the pencils. Drawing paper generally has what we call a tooth. So tooth is like a printed texture into the paper, and that texture grips and holds the pigment. That's what allows you to layer and blend up so you're getting complex blends and allows you to keep the colors smooth. Now, the paper that I'm using here today is Mitont by Canson. There are many different brands that are available. We do have a big write-up on those on our website as well. You can head to kitandclouder.com, click FAQs, then coloring FAQs, and you'll see papers there. Now the paper I'm using, if you're using the same one I am today, please make sure that you're using the right side. This is one of the only dual-sided papers on the market. So you may feel that your paper is dual-sided because it's got a texture side and the other side smooth, but that's not actually dual-sided. It's only just been printed on one side and the rest is just the standard paper. Whereas this one has two different textures. So the side I'm printing on is a little bit softer. The other side, the way you can tell, is this side here. Notice it's got these little bumps all over there, like little circles. We call that the honeycomb print. Now that's for holding chalks and pastels and more heavy media like this. So we tend not to use this side. It takes a lot longer to blend out because the tooth is bigger to hold that different type of material. So I'm using the reverse side here. So if you are using the Mitont paper, just make sure you've got it on that right side. If you're using a different drawing paper, you'll want that textured side so you can grip the pigment. Now, if you are using a smooth paper here today, that's okay. It's all practice and you're still going to be going over the techniques and it's still going to help you learn, but it's going to be a little harder to blend smooth. Your key here today is to go really slow and really soft as you build up the colors. That's going to help you gain a little bit more control. So no matter what paper you're using though, pencil work is all about going slow and soft with the blending. It's important to always keep your pencils nice and sharp. That gives you control and allows you to push the pigment down the page. And it's all about blending in really little soft layers. So we just build the pencil up over and over with multiple layers and strokes. And you can see the more layers I add, it grips into the paper and I'm slowly flattening that paper down. It's really important as you're blending though to be aware of the size of your strokes. If you're finding it hard to blend your paper smooth, if you're new to using paper with a tooth, it's probably because your strokes are too big at this point. So we want to make sure our strokes are only really small, and I even like to use small circles to push the paper flat as I blend. Keeping that pencil sharp really does help with that as well. Now instead of coming in with a hard texture and pressing it all flat straight away, the reason why we go soft is that it allows us to build up those blends. So if I come in here nice and softly with one color, you can see I'm not placing any pressure down, but then I'm able to come back over with the next color and continue to blend out. Notice I've got no lines between my colors here. And then it's all about going back, building up the layers so you've got the control. Obviously we use a few more colors in this here today, but you can see the idea. I'm slowly filling in the tooth, having control over my blend and getting those transitions nice and flat. Now what you may find when you're starting out with pencils, it's normal to be a little heavy-handed. Now I'll just show you what happens if we're a little bit too heavy-handed. If we come in here and we lay down our color, notice how my color is ending in a straight hard line there. Now as I come over to blend, what happens? You can see that line in between the colors. I haven't blended them smooth. That's because there was just too much pressure and I flattened down the tooth and the page too quickly. That means that there's no grip left for any more pigment, so I wasn't able to get that smooth. That's why we want to always focus on going nice and slow and soft so we do have that control over the duration of the blend. However, here's a little trick to help today. This is one that I have made up called fuzzying up the edge, technical term. So if you come in and you're a little heavy-handed and you find you've got that line, it's not ruined. What I want you to do to focus on here is come back in really nice and slow and soft and come back over your edges here to fade them out. And I just go over the top to soften down. You can hold the pencil further back as well. That'll allow you to place less pressure on the pencil. And then once you've flattened that down, just make sure that the next color you come in with is nice and soft. And then you should be able to come back here, nice small little circles to blend. And you can see we're able to get those transitions smoother. So that's a good little tip to keep in mind today as you blend. Going back over, fuzzing up any edges that look a little bit too hard, but making sure overall that you're patient with your pencil coloring. It's about slow, soft layers for control. It's not a race to finish here today. Enjoy being in the moment to create that finished piece. Now one last thing before we jump in, one tool that I'm going to be using here today that you're going to see is our Kit and Clouder pencil dusters. Now, every so often, you're going to see me just wiping the page off like this, removing any of the dust that falls from my pencil. Now, the reason why this is important is if you're not constantly removing those little bits of pigment that are falling off, you can accidentally push them down into the page and smudge the pigment in. It'll give you a dirty look and you'll get little speckles all over your coloring. So you can use many different things to do this. I used to use a feather because it was really soft, like a little emu or ostrich feather, and just brush away the pigment with this. The problem that I had with them is they kept breaking all over our page. So what I actually did when a lot of people requested what to use, I actually had these dusters made up for us. So I've actually picked the bristles that we use on these, so they are super, super soft. They're softer than most of the art brushes and makeup brushes that are out there as well, to make sure that you're not pushing the pigment down, because you do have to be careful when you're brushing away that you're not using force, which is encouraging that pigment to grip into the tooth of the paper. But you can use whatever you have on hand. All right, welcome back. We're going to go ahead and jump on in, straight away getting started with our eyes. So I'm just going to zoom in a little here and we're ready to go. So I'm going to start us off with a little bit of my black pencil, and we're going to use the black to just pop in straight at the top of the iris. And I'm going to shape the iris here. So I'm coming around the sides and I'm going to create sort of upside down V shape here, and I'll do that on each side, and I'll try and do it at about the same point. So adding the black at the top can help ground the eye shape a little bit. Now using that black, I'm going to take my time and come around the eye. My pencil is really sharp and I'm using a pressure similar to as if I was writing. You can see I'm trying to get the line even the whole way around. And then I'm also going to follow along with the shape of the pupil here. Now I'm going to create the small highlight in the bottom by doing a U shape just in that lower left corner. And then I'm going to add some color to the rest of the pupil. Come around the large highlight that's already been drawn in for you. Sometimes you'll be working on an image that doesn't have the highlights drawn in, so you can absolutely add these yourself to have more control over the personality of your character. You can see I'm building up several layers here, working on getting the blend a little bit smoother. If you have little white speckles showing through, this is a good thing. This is the tooth of your paper, and it means that when you can see those little white speckles, your paper is going to hold more layers of pigment, meaning you have more control over the color of the blend, the smoothness, and building up the vibrancy. So we want to keep some of that. However, in the pupil here, we know it's going to be just black, so I can do those multiple layers to try and get it as flat as possible. I am going to come back with a blender pencil shortly though to remove the last of that. So you don't need to spend a lot of time getting that perfect. I'm going to now come to the other side, other eye that's there in our scene, and do the same thing. Create that same U shape in the bottom left corner and try and keep it about the same size and same position that you did in the first eye. All right, now once you've done that, I'm going to grab a little bit of my mineral orange and I'm going to apply this into the top of the iris here. A fun fact, did you know that owls only have brown to golden eyes? They can never have blue or green eyes. Next color I'm going to use is a little bit of yellowed orange. So if you ever see a picture with a blue-eyed owl, it is photoshopped. And I know this because I thought the blue might be nice and bright against all the brown feathers, but it would be incorrect. Even though you can color things like that incorrect, I thought I'd try and make him a little bit more realistic for us here today. Canary yellow is next, and I'm coming down toward the bottom, but I'm leaving just a little pop of white at the very bottom of the iris there. And then I can come in with my white pencil and I shade through that white area and just over where the canary yellow has ended, just to smooth that out. The next step, I'm grabbing my colorless blender. Now, if you don't have a blender, you can just come back with your black pencil. But the blender is essentially the same core as your colored pencil, but without any colored pigment. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to apply this straight over where I added the black previously. What it's going to do is it's going to push around the pigment. So I'm going to be able to focus on getting a smoother blend, flattening out the last of that tooth, and I can shape around the eye a little bit more because I can push that pigment around. As I come toward this lower highlight, I am going to extend the blender just softly over the top, and then I'm going to swap to my white and color over it. You'll see it's almost like a light soft gray. The blender pencil is used to just move pigment around the page, and it can help us quickly flatten down tooth in areas. I don't use it all the time because it can produce a textured or irregular blend. And I do go through this in most classes for you as well. We'll be using it a little more today, so we'll talk about it a little more shortly. But it can really help just with getting the last of that tooth down. Now, I'm using a white gel pen. I've got a Uniball Signo here to do the remaining highlights. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in a larger highlight, pretty much diagonal down from the highlight that you did at the top. Now, if your highlight at the top lost a bit of shape, you can always go over that. Mine did a little bit. And then I'll do a little highlight at the bottom. And then I added a few more sparkles around just to give him a bit more of a magical look. So I'm just adding some smaller little dots in here as well. Now, still using that orange blend, I'm going to go ahead and add some shading into the beak and the toes. This time though, I'm going to start with a little bit of burnt ochre. I'm going to add shading into the side of the beak here, blending in toward the center. I'm also going to come underneath the nostril. So the nostril will be darker because we're sort of seeing inside that little hole area. So I add the shading around that to help it appear that way. And you can see I've added a little bit of shading into the sides to show where it's curving around. Right next to the nostril, I'm leaving this little bit of white. That's going to create a reflected light, and it's going to help to show that the beak is a little shiny. So basically, when we have a rounded object like this, right where we have a direction change, so we've got that little hollow in and then it curves up, we get a little bit of light that will hit that edge and appear reflective. So we're leaving space to create shine. This is a little bit more advanced than we'd usually go through in a free class, but I'm just going over it quickly just so you can see how we would usually approach this. Coming into the little talons, I'm going to add some shading just into our sides, and we can do the same here. Leave a little pop of white at the very edge to create a bit of reflected light. All right, the next color I'm going to use is a little bit of that mineral orange. So I can just start blending this out. Going straight over what I've just done and extending a little further. So most of the shading here is going to go into that nostril area and then just into the sides. Now let's brighten the blend with a little bit of yellowed orange. and then canary yellow. And you can see our blend has a nice contrast between light and shade. And we're leaving these little pops of white in our very lightest highlight areas so we get that shine. So you can see in the beak we've got a white highlight straight through the middle and then around those nostril shapes to create those shiny surfaces. In the little talons we've got our highlights straight through the center of each one. Alright, now I'm going to pop in to his head. We're going to add a little bit of that shading around. I'm going to start with chocolate and let's work on the darker feathers at the top. I keep wanting to call it fur. So I'm going to start in this little V shape and I'm just going to do little individual strokes extending around. So remembering how our feathers are going to extend around from the beak shape. And I'm creating these tiny little strokes and they've all got gaps between them, which is what helps the texture to stand out. And you can see I'm now coming in from the top. Now I find it easier to move my page around. It's easier to flick away from yourself, but I'm trying to keep it straight for the tutorial here. So feel free to move your page around. You don't need to keep it static. And I'm really just playing around with the curve of these strokes, bringing them through. And then rather than just doing one layer like this, I can go through and add a few more individual strokes and start to build up the texture into the space here. Multiple strokes to really blend this through. They're all different lengths and they're all different thicknesses. So I'm working for more of that textured, imperfect look, which is exactly what we want to create that fuzzy effect. Now the next color I'm going to use is burnt ochre. And all I'm doing here is I'm just popping straight over the top of what I just did with the chocolate and extending these strokes in layers further in. Now I'm not trying to lay my strokes directly over what I did with the chocolate. It's more that I'm following the same shape and direction. So I'm not trying to line everything up. I'm just starting in that shadow area and I'm extending a little further out. And rather than making the strokes longer, I'm extending, you can see here, shorter strokes, but in layers. So don't think in terms of like one extra long stroke, think like little dabs to bring it out. And every stroke always has a little gap between it. So I'm lifting the pencil, laying it down. If your strokes are starting to get fuzzy and you're losing the definition, your pencil is probably a little too blunt. So you're going to want to give it a quick turn in your sharpener to bring that point back a little bit. My next color now is a little bit of goldenrod, and I'm just going to do the exact same thing. So we're slowly bringing in toward our center here. And now my lightest color, which is beige. And I'm just doing the same thing, doing these little strokes, but now they start to come through that highlight area. However, I'm still spacing them out by leaving a gap between them. Now at this point, we've got the light source laid down. We can see the contrast between light and shade, but our color is very soft and we've got a lot of tooth showing through. So what we want to do here is we want to come through and we want to deepen everything up To help us do that, I'm going to do something that I wouldn't usually do with a smooth blend, but I'm going to use the blender pencil early on. And this blender pencil is going to come through and start to flatten some of that tooth. Once the paper is a bit flatter, it means that I can layer up the strokes on top, and because we want to see the texture here, we don't want to blend smooth, it's going to create this nice texture over the surface. We wouldn't usually do this with a smooth blend because you'd see the lines between the colors. And we don't use a smooth paper, even though a smoother paper would help with the texture here that we want to get. The problem is a smoother paper doesn't work great to get your smooth blends because we obviously are going to see all the lines between the colors, but it also stops you from really building up color depth. So we want this to be really nice and rich and vibrant. And having a paper with tooth, or this printed texture, allows the pigment to sit in that tooth. And then as we add more and it gets flat, it means that the color is brighter. Okay, so grab this blender pencil, sharpen it up, and then I'm literally just applying this in the same way I applied the strokes previously. I'm doing individual strokes straight over the shadow color first, and then extending further into the highlight. Now don't worry if it appears too light at this point, and you may need to use a bit more pressure than you were using before just to really help flatten this area. It doesn't need to be perfect. Remember, we're aiming for texture. All right, next color that I'm going to use is I'm going to come back with the chocolate. And I'm literally going to apply this right where we did the first time. Now, I'm not worried about getting these layers on top of the exact strokes. Again, I'm just following that basic shape around. All right, next color is a little bit of the burnt ochre, and we're just doing that same thing, extending that color around. Now, if at any point I use the blender pencil and you don't have a blender pencil, goldenrod is next. You can always just repeat exactly what we're doing now with your pencils. You may just need 3 layers rather than 2. But you can pick up a blender pencil from any company to use with your pencils. Just find out what core of pencil you're using. So pencils will generally have a wax or an oil-based core. Prismacolor, a wax-based. Derwent make both a wax and oil-based blender, so you can use whichever one suits your pencil brand the best. Some of the cheaper pencil brands may not have a blender. So if you're using something like Crayola, I'd probably use the Derwent oil-based blender because they're likely more oil-based pencils. It's generally cheaper to create. And then with the beige, I'm not using much of this color, but I'm just applying little strokes, again, through that middle highlight area. You should have some nice depth now on that section. Now I've got the little insides of the ears. I'm just going to do them a little bit lighter than we did the outsides. I'm just going to grab the burnt ochre, apply some little strokes on the edges, and then I'm going to come in with a little bit of the goldenrod. And then the beige. So it's just going to remain a little softer through here. And now for the rest of the face, I want it to be lighter than this section, but we are still going to get darker around the outer edge. So I'm going to come back with the chocolate, make sure it's nice and sharp, and I'm just going to apply those little strokes around the edge. And you can see here, I've already got these little lines drawn in for you. So you can literally just trace some of these, and then I usually would add a few more just so it's just not like a straight line. Try not to have all of your strokes ending at the same point. Extend some further out, make some shorter, create extra layers in areas. We just want to make sure it's not a straight line, as that's going to look very, it's not going to look very natural. And you might even come back from the top here and apply some of those strokes extending down, so you can still get that soft feathered look there as well. Around the little beak, I might add a few little strokes emanating from that area as well. Now I'm also going to come around the eye, so I'm going to come along this outer edge here, just with that chocolate still, and I'm going to do a few strokes extending out. So again, keep that circular approach. And the same on the other side as well. All right, next color is a little bit of the burnt ochre. We can even start with this nice and close to the eye. And bring this color along that inside edge as well, just to add a little shading. And then I basically just follow that shape around, and I'm extending in just a very short way. Always keep that pencil sharp so you have control on the strokes to keep them soft and defined. A little bit of goldenrod. And you can see I'm using the same colors as I did at the top, but I'm keeping them closer together now. So there's more highlight left over in the face, more of that lightest color, which means the blend overall is going to appear softer, even though I'm using essentially the same colors. And then a little of the beige. And you can extend this color a little further in, but again, we're still leaving quite a lot of white. Now to finish this section off, grab that blender pencil. And you're just going to come all the way along that outer edge, doing your individual strokes, extending in toward the center. And because we've got quite a few layers of pigment over the top of each other in the same areas, it should flatten out most of that tooth. Make sure you're using quite a bit of pressure. The more pressure you use, the more you're going to be able to flatten in this area. When you come to the eye, just be careful that you're not picking up any of the black. So don't go the whole way back to where that black is. Otherwise you'll be pushing that pigment into the brown areas. And if you want to soften any of the edges, you can always come in with the white pencil as well. And that can just take some of the harshness out of your strokes. Everyone's is going to be a little different though. So the more time you spend softening everything out, softer the look is going to be. And to show you an idea, you can probably see the difference here. This one, I spent a few more layers just really softening, whereas this one is a bit stronger. I worked a little bit quicker there and I focused more on just flattening rather than smoothing out. They're pretty close though, but you can see a bit more of the softness in this one. And just to finish out that face, let me zoom back in. Let's go ahead and apply the soft blush. So all I do here is I grab the pink and I just shaded very softly along the edge of that cheek. So I'm holding the pencil further back, which means I'm placing less pressure on it. Same on the other side. I wanted quite a lot of blush to make it appear like rosy and kind of baby-like almost, very cutesy. And then I grab the blush pink and I soften that out. So I'm just applying so lightly. I'm basically just rubbing the pencil over the paper rather than blending it in so much. And then I come back with my white and you start off the pink and then blend back and over it. And you should be able to create that really nice, soft, almost airbrushed effect. I'm just doing small circles, really taking my time to come over every little aspect and get that nice and smooth. And that's the base all done. And before I move on to the body, I'm just going to very quickly color up the little branch. I've got a little bit of dark brown and I'm very quickly just tracing the outline here. And then what I'm going to do is just a few individual strokes for texture. Next color is chocolate. And I'm very quickly just really pulling the color through. I'm not trying to be precise by any means. And then you can even grab a little bit of beige. That contrast will help the texture stand out. And then I grab my blender and I very quickly with long strokes pull it through each of these areas. And you should have kept some of that texture. Very simple way to do a branch. Your blender helps push down the pigment where those lines you created were. So instead of smoothing everything out, because we haven't done a smooth blend, it just keeps that line exactly where it is. Okay, so let's now go through and we'll finish up with the body. So I'm going to start on the wings here and I'm going to make them a little darker. So we're going to start with a little bit of dark brown. And all we're going to do here is trace underneath each layer and start to add in our cast shadow. Now instead of doing just a line, you'll notice I'm actually shading it out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start applying some little strokes into each feather. So let's trace around them first. And remember, instead of a line, think of actual shading. So make it a little thicker, fade it out a little. And then we can start to come in and apply some lines. We can even do this from the top section here as well. Right, next color is a little bit of the chocolate. And I'm just going to go straight over the top and over some of these lines we added before I start to blend out. Burnt ochre is next, and with each of these colors we're extending further into each wing, each feather. You can see I'm coming over those lines and pulling it through to get more coverage. Between these lines I'm aiming to leave a little bit of white, that way the lines will still stay distinguished. A little bit of the goldenrod. You can see getting quite good coverage now. Still leaving those little pops of white between my lines. And then my beige. The beige is nice and light. I'm bringing through most of the remaining area, but you can still leave that pop of white between the lines. That's really just going to help to increase your contrast and really make the texture stand out. So you can see there, right between these two lines, I've got that little bit of white shining through. You can even bring that white through just some of those areas between, and it'll make them even more pronounced. And then once you've done that with that, you can grab your blender pencil and then just flatten everything out like we've already been doing. Remember, if you don't have the blender, or if you find that the color is not as rich as you'd ultimately like it, I would just repeat everything again. We always want to make sure that you're not using the blender too early for things like this as well. If it's super whisper light on the page and you don't have a lot of depth, repeat everything again and increase your pressure a little bit before you come through and use this one. So it should be about the same depth of color as the top part of his head. Once you're done with that, you can even go over any of the dark brown again if you want to make that a little bit more enhanced. And then what I'm going to do right at the end is I'm going to use the dark brown just to do some little spots on each feather. And the position and placement of these is a little bit random. You can even grab your white gel pen and do a few little dots of these as well. Just in and around, and again, all different sizes and placement. It's just adding a bit of texture and pattern and breaking things up. Now on the remaining part of the body, I'm going to grab the burnt ochre, make sure it's nice and sharp, and we're going to add in some light feathers. Now all I'm going to do here is like a slightly curved V shape. And try to make them roughly about the same size. And you can curve them around as the body curves around as well. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start in the middle of one V and come in the middle of the other and extend down to create the next layer. And you can see I'm keeping my pencil really soft. If you struggle with soft, hold the pencil further back from the tip as it'll help you to place less pressure on it. And you can do these all different sizes. I don't want them to be like absolutely perfect, and I want my coloring to be very light so they look less sort of thought out. And then as we get down, they may even get a little smaller and more layered. And we can even go around like some of the shapes that are being drawn in at the bottom, just to give it a bit more natural sort of look as well. So you can start making it a little bit irregular. Keep the pressure soft. Now as I come around the talons, I'm just going to add some shading here and just some little strokes up to show that fuzziness around the feet. And now from the top of each of these, I'm just going to do a little bit of shading. So rather than just lines, you're actually starting to shade this out a little. Again, my shading is super soft. I want this to be a very light color. Goldenrod. I'm just going over and extending just a little further down. Again, you can see I'm keeping it really nice and soft. And actually, what I'm going to do on this other side, I'm going to add in the other wing. So on these longer feathers, I'm just going to grab the dark brown and I'm just going to sort of trace around the bottom of each of these longer ones. And this will just be the side of the wing, or the other wing popping through. And then I just use a little bit of the chocolate and just sort of come over that. And then my burnt ochre and my goldenrod. It's a little messy, but giving us that texture through there. And the beige, and then with the beige, I'm just going to continue shading each of these. I take my time with the beige and really come over each shape. That will help me flatten a little bit more tooth as well. And then rather than using the blender, you can soften the tooth down by coming in with the white. And I start from the white, which will be the bottom of each feather, and blend up to the top. This will keep your color really nice and light. Gives it almost a pastel hue as well. You can use the blender as well if you still have quite a bit of tooth showing through. Everyone's is going to be slightly different. Alright, now if I zoom out, that's actually our little owl all done. So we've gone through a lot of theory just in this one lesson to help you take a simple image and make it look a lot more dimensional and detailed. These techniques can apply to absolutely any image that you color up as well. But remember, it takes time and practice for these techniques to really sink in and become more natural. If you'd like to learn more with me, I have a lot of classes available over on my website at kitandclouder.com. If you head to the homepage, you'll find free classes that you can try for markers and pencils, such as the Markers 101 class, which goes over even more beginner basics than we were able to cover today. There's free color blend charts, coloring FAQs page, so we can help you feel more confident with your coloring journey. I always do free private tutoring with my students as well, so if you feel like you didn't get the results that you'd like today, or if you have questions in the future, please reach out and I'd be more than happy to help with extra tips on your coloring to help you feel more confident. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll share your coloring with us. Welcome to the markers portion of the video tutorial. Now you should have watched the start of this tutorial where I go through the ins and outs of the art foundations and fundamentals that we'll be using to color this little guide today. If you haven't watched this, please do go back and watch it first. I know sometimes that listening to someone talk can feel a little boring when you just want to start coloring, but understanding the why behind what we're doing here today is extremely important, just as important as the coloring itself, to help you grow with your skills. Now before we get started, I am going to run us through a marker blending basics video that's going to help you with understanding the strokes we'll be using here today. And this is applicable for any brand of alcohol markers. Okay, now with markers, I'm using my Copics here today. Now it's important when using alcohol markers that you use a good bleed-proof cardstock. Now I'm using Express It blending card. There are a few other types available as well, which you can find on the website, kitandclouder.com. Click FAQs, then Coloring FAQs, then you'll see the papers section with suggestions there. Now the reason why we use a bleed-proof cardstock is it allows the ink to sit on the surface of the paper for longer rather than seeping through those fibers of the paper. This is what allows us to blend the colors together and allows us to work them a bit more. The reason why I like the Express It is I find it tends to hold more layers of ink for longer, allowing the ink to sort of sit on the surface for a bit longer. Now, if you're brand new to using markers, what I would suggest, if you have difficulty with any of the strokes here today, that you pop onto our website, again, kitandclouder.com, click Classrooms at the top of the page, and then scroll down to the free Markers 101 class. Now, this class runs through all of your marker fundamentals. Okay, so you can use any colors at all if you like. If you're going to color along with me, I'm just using my B12, 14, and 16. So a good blend to show highlight, midtone, and shadow. Now, when we do a coloring with our markers, the main stroke that we're going to use is feathering. So I don't really use circle blending in our classes, and that's because if you've learnt circle blending before, what happens is if you've got your dark, middle, and light colors and you're circling, you can actually muddy everything up. So when we work with lightsource, I tend to use more feathering method. Now, feathering is when we'll come parallel with the page. Now, I'm holding the marker like I just would normal writing. So it's a little bit on its side rather than straight up and down. Now, you may notice I'm holding the marker so it rests on my second last finger. A lot of people color with it on the last one. And when you color on the last one, what you'll notice here is I'm very close to the page. So as soon as I put my hand down, I'm sort of hitting the page already. Whereas if it on my second one here, when I come down to place the marker, I've got a bit more of a gap. My marker's sitting high from the page and I have a bit more control. Now, if you usually color like this, you may find that it just takes a little bit of practice to get comfortable in this one. You may find it doesn't work for you at all, and that's okay. But I have had a lot of feedback that it's helped with fine lines. So have a practice today, see how you go, and maybe something that helps. So when we do the feathering, we're going to come parallel with the page and we lift our wrist at the end of the stroke. And that gives me a nice fine finish to help with blending. I want to use the side of the marker so I get nice big broad coverage. And you can see I'm overlapping so I get, again, that broad coverage there. I'm trying not to have much individual stroke like this showing at the end. So you can see here I've got pretty good coverage and just lifting as I finish up. Then I grab my next lightest color, so this is B14 for me, and I start just back of where I've ended with that color. And then I just do the same thing. So I feather straight over the top and extend further out. And I keep going until I can't see the line between the colors any further. Now I can see, however, the line of where I started this color. So once I've finished this, I just go back real quick. One layer should get rid of that line. So the idea with markers is that you keep blending until the lines disappear, and that's what your bleed-proof cardstock helps with. So next color, B12, same thing, you just start back a little bit, building up, and remember, use the side of that marker, nice big broad strokes. Keep going until that line disappears. When it does, if you can see where you started the color, just go back one nice stroke over the top until you're happy with the blend through. And that's all there is to it. So you want to make sure we're not getting these little stubby sort of strokes here. If you are, use a bit more the side. And try and work quickly. I find when we work quickly and we're a little bit more carefree, it's a lot easier to blend with the markers. We're not as heavy-handed. We don't need to think it through every little step so much to get a nice finish. All right, welcome back. I've got something exciting to share today. So today I'm going to be coloring up this little guy with Ohuhu markers. The technique, no matter what brand of alcohol marker you have, is exactly the same, but I just received these in the mail literally this morning, so I haven't even done any coloring with them. I've just swatched them and had a bit of a color match for the image here today. So this will be my first time properly using them in class. I know so many of you have been asking for these to be used in our classes, and I'm really happy to say that I'll now be including the color blends in all future classes going forward. I'll work on getting some color blends up onto the color blends page on our website as well, so that you can use these for some of our past classes too. Okay, so if you're using any other brand, you can use your favorite color blends, or you can match out to a Copic or Ohuhu chart. In your booklets, you'll have blends for Spectrum Noir, Copic, Pro Marker, and the Ohuhu as well. I'll yell out the Copic colors as I'm doing this too, just because I usually do the tutorial with Copics and it is the most widely used marker still on the market. And I want you to follow along using the exact same technique no matter what brand that you're using. And remember, if you only have a few markers and you don't have the colors I'm using here today, there's no reason why your colors can't be totally different. There's no reason why this can't be a pink owl, for example. You can really play around with the colors that you have on hand. Don't feel like you have to wait till you have all the same colors as a tutorial. The techniques are exactly the same no matter what color, what blend, or what brand you're using. So this is why it's important just to jump in with what you have. I always use this anecdote, but I had someone do the entire skin and hair class with one blue color blend because they said it was important to them to know if they could learn to use the markers and to really grow on the techniques and skills before just wasting money on getting more. And they're probably one of the better colorists that I've seen lately. So absolutely use what you have. You don't need to have a full set of any brand, and you don't need to have the fanciest brand of markers available. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump on in. I'm going to start with our eyes here today. Now, in the pencils class, I started with the black first. Now, with markers, because we basically are pushing around alcohol on the page, If we start with the black first, we're in danger of pulling that into the lighter iris area. So what I'll do is start with the iris colors. So I'm going to start with a little bit of my E120, and that is my E15 in Copics. And I'm just going to apply this to the top of the iris here. I'm going to leave just the very, very top because we're going to do that in the black. I'm using the brush end of the marker, and now I'm going to blend down toward the bottom. So the next color I'm going to be using is a little bit of Y10 or Y38 in my Copics. Go straight over the top of the last color and extend down. It's important that you use a good bleed-proof cardstock with your markers to prevent any bleeding. I'm using Express It blending card, and there are a lot of alternative options listed under the coloring FAQs page of the website as well. The Y6 is next, or Y35 in your Copics. And these colors are all listed in order in the booklet as well. So when you go to the color blends page, it's easy to follow along because you can just work in order. I'm obviously working backwards here because I'm working dark to light. And the Y010 or Y11 in Copic. And I'm blending through that bottom area. So you can see in our iris here, we have a really nice gradient from dark to light. Now, this next step, I'm going to bring in a Prismacolor pencil to help us out. I'm just using a black pencil here because I want to come along the outside edge of the eye. Now, you can use your markers for this, those that are a little more confident. It requires a very fine line, so I wanted to show you how you could approach this if you're not comfortable with that. And that would be just using the pencil itself to come along the edge. This is going to keep it the finest for you. So all marker users should really have a black and a white colored pencil in their stash. Personally, I love the Prismacolor Premier for this. I feel like they go really nicely over alcohol markers. They're very smooth because they're a wax-based pencil as well, so they'll apply nicely to the page for you. It just helps with smaller details like this that are maybe sometimes a little harder to do with your markers. So just bring that up toward the top. And then when you get there, we're going to swap into the black marker because this will be a nice stronger color through the middle area of the pupil. And with the black marker, I'm just going to come straight along the top of the iris area there. Using black at the top helps to ground the expression a little. And I'm connecting into that side area as well. Come around the larger highlight. Now you'll notice that my larger highlight is in that top right corner of each side of the pupil. This is helping to direct our gaze. You can see the gaze look like it's going toward the top. So you can, if your image doesn't have that drawn in, you can always draw that in yourself in any direction of where you want to direct the character's gaze. I'm going to create a little upside down U shape at the bottom left, so the opposite side to that highlight of the pupil. And that's going to be a little bit of reflected light to show a little bit of shine in the eye. And we'll do the same on the other side. Try and make them about the same size. If you need to come around the shape of the eye again, just to even things up, you absolutely can. I even just use a very soft pressure just to sort of fade that line out, just so it's not a hard straight line, it's a little softer. Now I'm blending in toward that highlight at the bottom. I've got a little bit of WG3 in the Ohuhu. or my W3 in my Copic. This is just a warm grey, and I'm just blending the edge of that black in toward that little highlight. If you want a bit of a fade, you can bring in a lighter colour, which I've put in your booklet, but I'm pretty happy with that fade there and leaving just a little touch of white. If you do lose the white, you can always grab a white pencil and pop that back in as well. So again, using your pencils to help with some little fine details if it's needed. Now to finish up, I've got my white gel pen and I'm using a Uniball Signo here. And I'm going to add a few more highlights around as well. Now the amount and shape of highlights that you use is always dependent on you, but it can really change the expression of the character. So play around with this a little. For a more magical look, you can apply multiple highlights to give a sparkling type effect. So you'll notice I'm adding a smaller circular highlight on a direct diagonal from the larger, and then I'm going to do some smaller dots around, and that helps to create that sparkly effect. Let's come into the beak and talons now. I'm going to use the same blend that I used in the iris. Before I get to that, did you know, a little fun fact, owls can really only have a golden or brown eye. They never actually have like a blue or a green eye. So if you ever see a photo like that, it's always photoshopped. I thought that was an interesting fact to share with you all because I did want to make his eyes blue, but Google told me no. All right, so my next color that I'm going to use here is I'm going to come in with the E120 and I'm going to apply some shading to the beak. So remember we spoke at the start of the video about adding the darker color into our shadow areas. So I'm going to come into the side of the nostril here, laying in that color on just inside where the nostril will be. I'm also going to come up the side of the nose and start to apply a little color in toward the center. So we're adding color where we've got a little bit of that rounding on the edge there as the nose curves away from the light with a little beak. Coming into the talons, and I'm going to add a little bit of this color into the left side of each one. The next color I'm going to use is a little bit of Y10, and we're going to go straight over the previous and extend a little further out. I'm sorry, those following along with Copic, that was E15, and now we're on my Y38. It's the same blend as we used in the eyes. So you can see these markers have a fairly good laydown of color. It's not too much bleed, which I noticed with a lot of the cheaper ranges. It is bleeding a little bit more than my Copics do, which gives me a little bit less control over the blend and not as able to make it as smoothly transitioned in the blend as I'd usually be used to. But overall, compared to cheaper brands on the market, right now, they're not too bad. Y6 is next, and you can see I'm filling in the nostril area, starting to come into the rest of the beak, and I'm aiming to leave a little pop of white through the very middle there so I can create a shiny highlight. And I'm going to do the same into the little talons as well. I'm going to add some quick color to the branch. Now I want this quite dark, so I'm going to use the same colors that I'll be using on the owl, but I'm going to apply them quite heavily. So I've got E130, which is equivalent to my E18 in my Copic, and I'm just going to trace the outline of the branch first. And then with this color, I'm just holding the marker nice and lightly. I'm just going to pull some little detail lines like through the center to create texture. Next color I'm going to use is a little bit of E120. Straight over the previous and extending out. I'm just pulling out these rough lines, and I'm not trying to blend here. I'm kind of just layering color because I want a little bit of texture down through this area. And then so that was E13 with Copics, and then this is E090, which is my E11. A lighter color to give us a bit of contrast so that texture stands out. You can absolutely repeat these steps as well if you want to build up a little more depth in that area. Sometimes when you're using alcohol markers, when we do our blend, because essentially blending is diluting, we lay down a darker color alcohol and we're diluting it with lighter color alcohol. So when we do these steps, what can tend to happen is the color becomes a lot lighter. Repeating everything again can build up more color depth for you and vibrancy. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the feathers. Now, in the little head here, I'm going to work on doing a feathered stroke. So we're going to do some flicking here. Now, I'm just going to show you the technique at the bottom for you to have a little practice with. Essentially, what we're aiming to do is we hold the marker close to the nib and we hold the marker upright. So we're working on the point of that tip. I tend to rest the marker on my second last finger here because what that allows me to do is as I lower my hand to the page, notice I'm not actually touching the page at all. Whereas I know some people rest it on the last finger, and as they come to the page, it hits the paper. So pulling the marker up can really help you have a bit more control because you're not instantly touching that paper. This has been something that people said have really helped them. Have a bit of a play around with it. It might take you a while to get used to if it's not your usual pen grip. But essentially, when I do this technique, what I'm aiming to do is move my hand back and forth and bring the marker with me. I'm not pushing the marker down into the paper and then flicking. This is going to make the tips of your nibs a little bit ruined, and it's going to make the flicks look quite thick. And you'll notice there as well, you can even see the little circle where I placed the marker, and because I placed the marker down, it gives a chance for the ink to pool before I flick. So we want to avoid this. To me, this looks a little bit like a nervous flick because we're so unsure where we're going to lay it that we put the marker down, we think about it a little minute, and then we flick it out. So we want to try and steer away from that. If this is you now, don't worry at all. I think pretty much all of us start with that sort of a flick. But what we're going to work on today, and you might want to get even some scrap blending card to do this. I used to just do pages and pages of this. But basically what I said before, I'm using the side of my marker. And actually, let me bring in a bit more. Here I've got some blending card there I can practice with. I'm going to move my hand and slowly lower the marker to the page. And you can see there, I get a nice, fine stroke. We can do short ones as well, just by moving the hand rather than moving the marker. Now the key to getting texture is separating these strokes like this. If all of our strokes are really close together, we tend to get this, which is going to look blended. So separate these strokes out. This is how we're going to create that texture. And as we use each color, it starts to fill in some of those gaps. So that gives you that variegated look. I do find it's easier to do the flicking away from myself, so you can move your paper around as you work as well, especially when you're trying to curve a stroke, because it's very hard for your hand to sort of curve in and keep it fine. Whereas if I'm going out, I can more easily curve that. So have a bit of a practice with that, and when you're ready, we're going to come back to our image. Now, I'm going to start in at the bottom area here. So starting where this little triangle shape is, and I'm just doing these little strokes up and around. Now these strokes can be all different lengths, all different thicknesses. We're trying to stay away from uniformity here so it looks more natural. But I'm essentially just following the shape of those feathers around. Remember at the start of the video, we talked about these feathers curving around from the beak area. So this is what we're aiming here. They're all sort of curving. We can layer up our strokes as well. So rather than just doing one layer of small strokes, we can do a couple of layers, build up a little bit more depth. So rather than longer strokes, think more about little extra layers to fill the space. Our strokes are not joining in the middle, and we won't get to that point until we reach our lightest color. So that was with my E130 or my E18 with Copic. My next color is my E120, which is my E15 with Copic. I'm going to go straight over the top and just extend my strokes further out. So I'm not aiming to lay my strokes directly on top of where I laid them previously. It's more that I'm following the shape around. So you can add new strokes in rather than feeling like everything has to perfectly match up. And I'm trying to get a bit of a point on both ends of the stroke as well, since this is our outer edge here. And start to apply those extra layers coming in toward the center. Okay, next color is a little bit of E110 or my E13 with Copic. Again, getting further in toward that center area. And again, make sure those strokes aren't all the same length. We don't want to have just a straight line where everything's ending. The last color here is my E090 or my E11. And I'm just bringing this through the highlight area. Now I'm still doing my strokes and still have the gaps between. This will allow some little bits of white to pop through for variation and contrast. Now that's one round of the blend, and you can see we've got a good amount of variation and contrast, but the blend is fairly light. We want to build up a little more color depth. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start with my darkest color again, which is that E130 or my E18, and I'm literally just repeating the steps again. So like I mentioned before, we can always repeat to build up extra depth in the blend, and that's just layering more pigment down on the paper. Next color is my E120 or my E15. So you're not trying to line up the strokes, just follow the shape and direction again. Leave a gap between those strokes always. You can see I work fairly quickly, so I get the different sizes and lengths. Gives me a bit more variation and less time to think it through and make it uniform. E110 or my E13. You can see already how much richer that blend is coming out the second time around. And then my E090 or E11. All right, now with that same blend, I'm going to continue around the rest of the face. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave off the E130 or the E18 and start with the E120 or E15. So we're going one shade lighter. I want the blend in the face to be a lot lighter here, and I wanted to show that we've got a shadow along the edge where the face is curving around. So I'm going to just follow these strokes around the edge, and you can see I'm trying to do a nice little stroke with my strokes going in all different directions here, so it does look more soft and natural. And always curving in toward that beak area. You can even come along like this edge here. You can give it a little bit more fade in. I'm going to come up into the little ear tufts as well. And you can even do a little bit next to our eyes. So I'm coming along the outer edge here. And then I'm going to extend a few strokes back. A little bit into the beak. And let's leave it there. Let's blend that out. A little bit of the E110 on my E13. A little bit of the E090 on my E11. And you can see these colors are all fairly close together. So unlike when we did that top section, I'm not really extending them in too far. I want this facial area to be a lot lighter. So I'm leaving my strokes really more around this outer edge. Be careful when you go around the eyes that you don't pick up any of the black, because you can pull that into the lighter area. And then a little bit of my E010, which is my E000, a really light soft color to allow you to get a bit more of a fade in toward the center of the face. Now you can repeat again if you want to build up a little more depth. Everyone's coloring is a little different, so you may find you're happy with where it's at. So just take a look and see what you feel it needs. I am going to add a little touch of blush as well. So I've got a little bit of RV260, which is equivalent to about my R81. And I'm just going to dab this along the outer edge. Now I want the blush to be quite prominent to give it more of like that cutie kind of look. So I am really extending this just a little further out. And then I'll soften that down with a little bit of RV010 or my RV00 in my markers, in my Copics. Now sometimes you can be left with a bit of an outline there where that lighter color has ended. So what I would do in this instance is I grab my colorless blender and I just color over that edge. So the blender is essentially the alcohol component of the marker with no colored pigment in it. So if you think of blending as that diluting, like we talked about before, essentially the reason why it's called a blender is you add that more alcohol to a darker pigment and it draws that pigment away. It really softens it down. So we don't really use it for blending because you can see when we're doing our blending here, we're blending in lighter colors and increments rather than just adding straight alcohol, which is too intense. But that's why the blender is often used as like a like resist techniques or to fix mistakes, because you're essentially just flushing out the color by adding more alcohol there. So it's a little bit of theory lesson. Okay, coming back into the wing now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the same blend that I used at the top. So now I come back to a bit of that E130 or my E18. And I'm going to use this color to create the cast shadows in the wings. So remember, we talked about cast shadow coming around any feathers that are in front or above. And I'm literally just tracing around these. And you don't need fine lines. In fact, a little bit of thickness is going to make it easier to blend out. So don't be shy on those colors at all. You can really come through and add in the depth. Now, I'm even going to go through and add a few individual strokes for a bit of pattern and texture as well. And again, I'm leaving a gap between each. You can do as many of you as you like. There isn't a right or wrong way here. I'm just trying to add a little bit of interest into the wings. You can see I'm kind of doing 2 to 3 though. I'll do a little bit of shading under where that head is. Now you can even bring this color up on the other side. So we'll do a little bit of the wing peeking out here. And you can sort of close that off a little bit. All right, next color is my E120 or my E15. I'm just going to go straight over the top and extend a little further out. So this time we are going over the lines that we drew. We're extending that color through, getting a little bit of a blend. And you can see here the Ohuhu are working exactly like my Copics usually would. It's very easy to follow along with any of the tutorials. If you have these, you don't need to do anything differently at all. E110 or E13 is next. And don't forget your booklets always have those color combinations in them, and there's a blank chart there and also the table that matches up with the Copic numbers. So that makes it really easy if you're following along with the video. Just like I'm doing now, it's basically just reading out the equivalent. What I like to do as well is I've got my colors on the table in the blend order. I always put them back in the blend order, something you don't see behind the scenes there. That can really help when you're following tutorials as well. And then my E090 or my E11. Now, if I've got a bit of a space between the strokes here, I'm not really filling that in. I'm actually leaving it with a little bit of white. That will just give me a little bit more depth and levels in the wing here. Gives you a bit more contrast. Now you absolutely can repeat any of those steps as well if you'd like to build up a little bit more depth. But if you're happy with the blend, you can grab your E130 or E18 again. And I'm just doing a few little dots of this color over the wing for a little bit of pattern. Now I'm doing these all different sizes. You can do as many or few of them as you like, but I'm just working quickly so I get a more randomized look. If that's something you struggle with, that random view, just try speeding yourself up. Gives us less time to think about it, makes it a little easier. I'm going to grab my white gel pen and do a few dots of this as well. In between, again, all different sizes, random placement, so work quickly to apply that to the page. You can do some little dots on the head as well if you like. It is optional. I had them in my one, so I'll just show you here. I'm just adding the dots of all different sizes. Do as many of you as you like. I'm literally just going directly over the shading that I just did. Okay, now we're going to come into the last part of the body. Now I'm just going to start with a lighter color here. I'm going to start with my E090, which is my E11. And what I'm going to do here is like an upside, it's like a soft curving V shape. And I'm going to extend this over the body. Now I'm using the tip of the marker so the lines are relatively fine. They don't need to be as fine as you can do them. Now to do the next layer, I start at the tip of the two above and then meet in the middle. Now, you don't need these to be perfect. If they're too perfect, we're in danger of creating this really uniform effect. So you can do them different sizes. You can start to curve them in. You can see here I'm not really always joining them to the ones above as well. Allow yourself to have a little bit of imperfection, and I know that can be hard for those of you that do struggle with imperfection, but it will make your coloring look that little bit more natural. Now we've got these little feathers at the bottom that you can come around as well. Come around the wing and do a nice cast shadow there too, to show that that's in front. You can do a little bit of shading up from the talons over that area. Now I'm going to grab a little bit of my E010 or my E000 and just apply a little shading at the top of each of these, or essentially blending out beneath the lines that you just created. And that's just softening them down a little. Now you can deepen some of these up with a little bit of E13, even just in the top area. But I'm pretty happy with how that's turned out. We can have a go. E111. I just very lightly, I'm not very familiar with these markers. I'm not sure how dark it's going to come up. But you can see there I'm just sort of coming around the base, just so the feathers there are standing out maybe a bit prouder on the chest. And then we could blend them out a little bit with the E090, the E11, coming underneath them, adding a little bit more shading. It's just so we get a bit of variation in level rather than making the chest area look like it's all the same level. And then a little bit of that E010 or E000 in Copic. And just blend out those top ones again. And the bottom ones should appear lighter because they had less pigment. And that is your little owl all colored up. So yeah, overall, I found the Ohuhu pretty easy to use. They, again, don't have as much bleed as some of the cheaper brands that I've tried. It is my first time using with them, and we have used a pretty limited color palette with not a lot of blending today because we're more focused on texture and building up those colors. So it's a little harder for me to give that side of the review just yet, but I'll work on getting something up on YouTube for everyone. But just based on what we've done here today, I don't think the result will be too different to what I've done with my Copics. I'd say that the Copics do blend a little easier just from my initial observation, and I do have a bit more control over the nib. It's a little bit firmer and a little bit finer. So for my fine lines, it's probably a little nicer in terms of that, and especially in flexibility as well. Color-wise, there's a huge color range. I'll work on getting some of my color blends up on the website for you all as well. If you are using other brands, I've already got color blends for you for Copic, Spectrum Nor, Pro Marker, and if there's any others you'd like to see, just let me know. You can just head to the website, kitandclatter.com, and click the color blends chart to find all of my favorites to download. So we've gone through a lot of theory just in this one lesson to help you take a simple image and make it look a lot more dimensional and detailed. These techniques can apply to absolutely any image that you color up as well. But remember, it takes time and practice for these techniques to really sink in and become more natural. If you'd like to learn more with me, I have a lot of classes available over on my website at kitandclatter.com. If you head to the homepage, you'll find free classes that you can try for markers and pencils, such as the Markers 101 class, which goes over even more beginner basics than we were able to cover today. There's free color blend charts, coloring FAQs page, so we can help you feel more confident with your coloring journey. I always do free private tutoring with my students as well, so if you feel like you didn't get the results that you'd like today, or if you have questions in the future, please reach out and I'd be more than happy to help with extra tips on your coloring to help you feel more confident. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll share your coloring with us.